So, for lesson 1, we're going to start with the basics. So, what is a camera? How does it work? What are pictures? How do we tell stories with the pictures that we take? And how do we express ourselves in this special kind of art form? So, just to start off, pictures are kind of like storytelling. So basically, pictures are kind of like storytelling. So I'm pretty sure that you guys have heard the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if not, now you've heard it. But it's really true. Every single image or photograph, same thing with a painting, tells a story from beginning to end in one frame. So how can we use our cameras on our phones, or maybe we have actual cameras, to tell stories to our friends and to the world? So basically, everything has a beginning, middle, and end when you're telling a story. And it's hard to kind of think about that when it's one single image. But we can use a few things that we'll learn a little bit later to tell the story that we want to tell. So maybe we want to talk about, or we want to tell the story of us being in quarantine at home and what we've been doing over our quarantine. So maybe the photograph will have some sort of like news in the background, whether it's a newspaper or a TV where maybe it has like COVID-19 or something to that. Maybe it says like COVID-19 or something of that nature. And then maybe you've been reading a lot of books in this time. So maybe the picture is that in the background, and we'll learn about background and foreground as well, the news in the background, and then you have a table with a stack of books and an open book, right? And that tells the story that you're in the house reading a lot of books. Or maybe you've been fortunate enough to have good weather and you're social distance picnicking with some of your favorite camp friends or with your family members. So maybe it's the park and a picnic blanket, right? You have to give the setting. And then maybe one of your friends or your family members is in the picture enjoying the sunshine or eating a piece of watermelon, something to that sort. But basically that picture is telling us that we're enjoying a picnic outside. So basic storytelling within an image. And so with that in mind, we can begin to learn about, we'll do some cameras first, just a little bit so you know the pieces. Even if you don't have one, it's just good information to know, because even our phone cameras have the same sort of pieces, they're just made smaller and work a little bit different. And then we'll learn about the different parts of an image and how we put them together to tell a story. So, if you haven't seen a big camera like this before, this is a DSLR camera. You don't really need to worry about that. Specifically, you could be using a digital camera, a phone camera. All cameras have the same parts, roughly. All of them are just a bit different depending on like brand and style and model, all of that jazz. So this is a camera, right? Clearly, we have our, oh look, you can see me. We have our screen so we can look at our, I'm not gonna do that. So this is a camera. It's may or may not be bigger or smaller than cameras that you've seen before. All cameras, whether it's your phone camera or a small digital camera or one of those point and shoot Kodak cameras that you have to still get the film developed for, all the cameras have the same sort of pieces to them. So this is my camera, right? We've got, and I have a separate piece. This is the lens, right? There's one on the camera at the moment. This is another lens, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then when you take the camera apart, this is the camera by itself. This is the camera body. And so we can talk about these pieces now. I'll start with the lens. So a lens is kind of like an eyeball for a camera. Basically, when you're just using this, you can't see anything without this. It's almost like me when I don't wear my glasses, but much worse because you really can't see anything. So this allows the camera to process light. So I'm gonna take the back off of this. So if you can see this tiny little hole, right? The light is coming through this front glass, through the hole that you see right there, and leaving through this back glass, and now the hole looks a little bit bigger because it's a different kind of glass, comes through the inside glass into our camera. And depending on what you're using, and we'll talk about this a little later too, the hole inside your camera, I don't know if you can really see it with this one or not very much. The hole inside your camera, I'm trying to get the light through it, can get bigger and smaller depending on the amount of light that you want to be let into your camera sensor. So now we're going to talk about the parts of the camera body. So inside of here, this screen is a sensor for light. It's actually up here, but it looks like you're seeing it here because this is a mirror. And so the light hits this mirror and reflects onto this sensor on the inside. And then the computer inside of the camera responds to the light and creates an image from the light that it sees. It's kind of the way that our eyes work. This is just a little less high-tech if you think about it, because biologically we're very high-tech. So that's what you do. You let the light in through the lens, hits the camera sensor through the mirror, and then you can take a picture. And there's this other really cool thing that I'm about to show you that allows you to actually take the picture. So you may or may not have heard the term shutter speed before, or shutter in general. There are some like photography brands and apps that have the word shutter in them. So the shutter is kind of like a door inside of the camera in which it stops and starts allowing the light in through the lens. So the camera needs to know when the light starts and when the light stops to register the information to take the picture. So this right here, if you can pay close attention, right over here, that door that you saw, I know it looked like it moved very fast, that little shutter door that moves within the camera tells the camera when to start and stop absorbing the light. I'm gonna see if I can make it slower for you guys so you can see it a bit better. So when you're taking pictures, you can, and we'll get there in a little bit, you can adjust the speed of how fast or slow the little shutter door inside of your camera opens and closes to take pictures at different speeds, and that changes some of the storytelling that we do. So that's your basic how cameras work. And then if you do happen to have even like a digital camera or a DSLR camera like this, there's going to be a knob on the top that has some settings, and we can go through some of those a bit later if you're interested. So now that we know how cameras work, we can start talking about how to make pictures tell the stories that we want to tell. It's the same thing as if you're writing a story or even composing a sentence. There's always a subject, right? There's a subject, and then there's some details that help the subject stand out more, or tells you what the subject is doing. So the subject of the photo, like if you're looking at this video of me right now, I would be the subject of this video. But how do you know if you're taking a picture of something? Like, how does the audience know what the subject is? There are different ways that we can express to the audience what that is. So if you'll excuse me for a moment, I'm going to pull up some examples on my computer and show you guys. So if you can see my screen, and I'll pull it up a little more. If you can see my screen, it looks like there are two pictures of the same butterfly, or two of the same pictures, right? Clearly, you can tell that the artist wanted the butterfly to be the subject of the picture. So the difference between this one and this one is how focused your subject is, right? This one is kind of blurry, and the plants are pretty clear. The plants in the background are pretty clear, but the butterfly is blurry. So if you're taking a picture of something, you want your subject to be in focus. Pretty simple. And there are different ways of being artistic when it comes to focus, and we'll learn some words right now. So there's something called the foreground and the background. So the foreground is what is in front, what is closest to our eyes that we can see. And then the background, I know you know this word, the background is everything else that's in the background of the picture. So in this picture here, the butterfly is our subject, and it is in focus in the foreground. And then the background is kind of nice and soft and fuzzy. And in this picture, even though the butterfly is supposed to be the subject, it's in the foreground. It's in the foreground, but the foreground is blurry, and the background is what's clear. So it's kind of hard for us to tell what the artist wanted us to know. So focus is really important in defining what your subject is in a picture. Another thing that's important to note when we're talking about the subject of our picture, or even just telling a story in general, is how we place everything within the picture. And this is called composition. It's the same thing as if you're writing a story or a poem or a piece of music. You're composing it to put things in certain places to convey a certain message. And one of the things that we do when we're composing a picture is we follow some guidelines. And at first, it's kind of like rules until you get the hang of it. And then once you're used to it, you can kind of bend the rules a little bit, because this is art. So we're going to talk about something called the rule of thirds. And the rule of thirds is as follows. It's basically like a tic-tac-toe board that you're going to look at when you are taking a picture. If anyone has used their own phone, their parents' phone, whoever's camera or phone, you may have noticed that when you're taking a picture, there's a grid that pops up. This is especially apparent in cell phones now. There's a grid that pops up on the screen when you're taking a picture. And it kind of looks like a slightly misshapen tic-tac-toe board. And by misshapen, I just mean the ratios of the boxes are different than what you'd be playing tic-tac-toe with. But basically, and I don't have a ruler, so you'll have to excuse me, but basically when you're looking at a picture and you're about to take a picture on your camera, this is very poorly drawn. I'll try better next time. There's a grid that pops up on your board, and you can see that there are 9 boxes, but they're split into thirds, so very poorly spaced, my bad. Here's 1/3, here's another third, and here's another third. And then if you're still continuing to look at it this way, there's a third, there's a third, and there's a third. We love fractions. So when you're composing a picture, it's important to follow these guidelines that your phone or your camera gives you, and eventually when you've been taking pictures for as long as I have, you kind of just like see it in your brain everywhere you look, to place things in strategic areas to either make things stand out or make things not stand out, or possibly like space things out nicely so there's a good like symmetry to your photo. So, and I have a whiteboard now too. So, when we are taking pictures and observing the rule of thirds, I'm gonna try better with my separation this time. Already not even. Okay, I'm trying this for you guys. So, when we are taking, I should get a ruler. When we're taking pictures and observing the rule of thirds, again, very poorly drawn, these corners here, this intersection, this one, and this one, so like the four corners of the middle box are going to be your best friends. They are super helpful when you're lining things up, and there are rules that we follow when we're taking certain types of pictures where things belong along these intersections to make our subject stand out more or make our photograph more physically appealing to the eye. So, if you've ever seen or had your portrait taken, you might wonder why somebody is not put in the middle of the picture, even though right now in this video I'm in the middle of it. A lot of times people will be off to the right or off to the left, and I'm about to tell you why. So basically, when observing the rule of thirds, you split everything up by these thirds. So you want your subject to take up the most space in your picture because it's your subject, it's the focus, it's what you want people to see. So when you're taking a picture, if you put someone, I'm gonna draw for you, if you put someone in the center of the picture, right, I'm gonna just make a poor stick man or stick woman, stick person. If you put your person, your subject, in the center of the photo, which a lot of people do, and some people like that, but again, the rules are guidelines really, and they can be broken, but this is just for learning purposes. So when you put your person or your subject in the middle of the photo, they're only taking up 1/3 of this picture. And there's 2/3, 2 full thirds, that are not your subject. There's other stuff going on, and that's totally fine. But when you're trying to tell the story about your subject, you want it to take up the most space. It only makes sense. So instead, what you do, and I don't have an eraser, instead, I'm gonna have a blue finger after this. What you do is you line up your subject with, there we go, with one of these intersections, with one of these vertices. I'll draw it in a second. With one of these or these, right? Typically, it's, if you're doing a portrait of somebody, it's the top left or right. And when you do that, if you line them up, I don't know if I can draw backwards. If you line them up like this, if you draw your stick person, right? I'll try to draw it in like the same exact place, in the same size that I drew it last time. When you draw your stick person, or when you put your subject in the picture, now it's taking up, of course not entirely, but it's taking up 2/3 of the picture instead of leaving 2/3 empty. Now there's only 1/3 empty, so there's more focus on your subject. And specifically when you're doing portraits of people, what you want to do, and I'll take my piece of paper again, I have different colors for this. Typically what you want to do when you're taking portraits of people is, I tend to lean towards the right when I'm taking pictures. I like to put people on the right instead of the left. I don't know why. What you'll do is you'll put, I know it's hard to see, you'll put their eyeball right there. I know now you're seeing it as left. Should have thought about that, it's backwards. But you put their eyeball exactly on that intersection, and then what you'll have is you'll have their head taking up some space here, and then like their body taking up space here and here, and it's just kind of nice. I'm not very well versed in how the brain works, but I do know that there are certain things that our brain just prefers to see. So, for some reason, when we split things up into thirds, our brain is very happy and it goes, ooh, that's nice. So, when we're taking portraits of people and we line them up this way, our brain enjoys it. So we kind of follow that rule when we're taking portraits, and I'll show you an example. If you guys have ever watched The Office or seen any sort of interview, a lot of the times people are positioned in this way. I need to blow this picture up so you guys can see it. People are positioned in this way so that they take up the most space within the picture. I'm gonna enlarge, enlarge, enlarge. Ooh. Pausing for a moment. It might be a little blurry, but I'm trying my best. So you can see in this picture of Jim from The Office when they're doing the interview, and conveniently we've put our thirds, our tic-tac-toe board on, you can see that his eye is up in this corner, and now Jim is taking up all of this space. And yes, we can see that there's a palm tree and there's a window, but the thing is, they're not the most important part of this image. Jim is. So Jim's taking up 2/3 and the plant is taking up 1/3. And we can also do this not with people, but with other things and places. So, getting to that. So, still following the rule of thirds, and I think I'll draw a picture on the whiteboard this time. When we're taking maybe like a landscape picture, something that has to do with nature, you might think, well, the entire thing is the subject, right? Because maybe there's a really pretty mountain view or a really pretty sunset on the beach, right? So I'm gonna erase this with my finger and draw a poor picture for you, and we'll split it up and talk about how the split works with the rule of thirds when you're doing landscape photography. So let's do the beach. This is the ocean, and this is a beautiful, I'm an artist. This is a beautiful sunset that we're gonna have here, and some seagulls and a few more waves in the ocean, just so you can tell what I'm doing. So here is my lovely sunset on the beach, or over the ocean rather. The beach isn't in this. So I've kind of already split it up nicely, but if you can tell, and I'm about to draw this for you so you can see what I'm talking about. I wish I had a different color marker. When I do this, you can see that the sunset, the sun and the sky take up these entire 2/3, while the ocean only takes up this bottom one. Again, this isn't exact science and it's a little out of the lines, but roughly we have 2/3 sky and 1/3 ocean. So even though the picture is clearly of the sunset on the ocean, we as the viewer know that the artist wanted us to focus on the sunset and the sky. It's probably a beautiful purple and orange and yellow color, as opposed to the ocean. Only because they chose to take up more space in the photo with the sky than the ocean. And it would be the same thing the other way. If we drew a picture of the beach, right? And maybe it happened to be sunset, but, and I'll just try to redraw, and more of the ocean and the beach, I'll try to make some sand, the ocean and the beach were taking up more space than the sunset. Very well drawn. This is our ocean and this is our beach. We know now that it's an important detail to know that this picture was taken at sunset. However, the artist, the photographer, wants us to focus on the beach more than the sky, simply because they took up more space in the frame with the beach. Very simple rules. You know, a good rule of thirds here and there will really help you tell your audience the story you want to be telling with your pictures. So, really quickly before I wrap up, I don't want to bore you with too much information. We're going to quickly mention a few of the things that I mentioned before that I said I would touch on. So earlier I mentioned how things are in focus and things are blurred when we are deciding what our subject is. And this is just for you if you're interested to like look up some things, and I'll give you a little bit of information, but not try to like crowd your brain. So when we're dealing with this little hole in the camera, right? When we're dealing with this guy, it controls something called aperture. So aperture controls how much light comes through the lens and into the camera at once. And when we can manipulate the light, we can decide how much of our picture is going to be very sharp in focus or very blurred and not in focus. So things that look like soft and fuzzy in the background. So if you want to learn about aperture, you can do some reading online, or reading in a book, or messing with it on a camera. And then I also wanted to talk about shutter speed really quickly. So we use different things for different sorts of pictures. So earlier you guys saw our shutter inside the camera close at a certain speed, and I can change that. You may or may not be able to see this, but you might be able to hear it. Now it was almost impossible to see to the naked eye. We could even do faster. And so when we control how fast or how slow the camera captures the light, we can capture motion in different ways. So maybe you see like a sports picture and it's completely frozen in time, and the person, if you're playing soccer, person's kicking the ball and you just have foot contact with the ball and it's frozen in time. Chances are they were using a very high shutter speed, because when the door closes faster, it captures that moment very quickly. And if you leave the door open too long, maybe you'll see people who paint with light or like sparklers in the dark. The shutter door is open for a long time, so it captures all of that movement and it's smooth or blurry. And so if you're interested in learning more about that, you can watch some YouTube videos, again, read a book, look it up online, and learn about shutter speed. Mess with your camera a little bit. So I would like to thank you guys for hanging out with me for this first photography lesson. And next lesson, we'll talk a bit more about how to make pictures really artful, very creative, and also do a little photo scavenger hunt. I know it's a bit difficult because I'm here and you're there, but I have a list written up, and it would be really cool if I can compile all of the scavenger hunt pictures and make some sort of album or some sort of thing, so that everyone who's been participating in this course can see each other's things. And it's probably going to be related to like what we've been doing over our quarantine, things that we miss about camp, those sorts of things, so everybody can still kind of come together as a community and share their experiences while being at home. So catch you next week.